بكيت في يوم ارسمك ارسم امل بسام ونرسم حضاره ومدن وبرك حمام وامان.
Peace treaty. Then we had Oslo. Then we had Israeli-Jordanian peace treaty. We had negotiations with the Syrians, which the only difference between the Israelis and Syrians was 500 meters around the Sea of Galilee. But the important point here is that you only had those breakthroughs when you had leadership, people who were prepared to stand up and have the courage to make the compromises, make the tough decisions, and an American leader who was prepared to work with them. So you had Kissinger, first of all, with Sadat and Rabin, and then Jimmy Carter with Sadat and Menachem Begin that produced the Israeli-Egypt peace treaty. You had Bill Clinton with King Hussein of Jordan and Yitzhak Rabin. In those cases, you were able to get the deals. Now, the big question is, are Sharon, Abu Mazen, and George Bush up to the job? Because they have the opportunity, and it will be up to the leaders to take advantage of that opportunity.
Well, let's address this issue. We have President Bush that he's, taking credit for anything happened around the world these days. Is he serious about taking charge, taking lead? Obviously, as you're saying, the Palestinian and Israelis are not going to do it without leadership of the American. Now, Russian, Putin was there in Egypt yesterday, and he wants to take the lead.
Good. Well,
so how is the dynamic?
It can't be done without the Americans.
Okay.
The President of the United States is the one that has the influence over both sides, as the sole superpower, has the ability to affect the calculations of both sides, to minimize the risks of their peace-taking. The question is, as you say, will Bush do it? He's made a personal commitment to it. He says he's ready to invest in it, but he's ambivalent. His ambivalence comes from the fact that, on the one hand, he prefers a legacy of promoting democracy in the Middle East than promoting peace. He saw what happened to Clinton, and he doesn't want to be Clintonized. What does that mean? It means that Clinton kind of risked all in a last desperate effort to try to get an Israeli-Palestinian agreement, and he failed. And Bush concluded from that it was better not to try than to try and fail. And so he's very cautious. He's seen Abu Mazen before, when Abu Mazen was prime minister almost 2 years ago. And he took the measure of the man at that time, and he calculated at that time that he wasn't worth investing in, and he kind of let him fail. Now he's been distracted by Lebanon, Iraq, and while he's done things like try to get $350 million out of Congress, he's appointed General Ward, he's appointed Jimmy Wolfenson, which are all good things. But the $350 million got caught up because the Republicans put all sorts of conditions on it, and General Ward's responsibilities are very constrained, and he's not very active, and Wolfenson is only dealing with the economics and not with the politics. It's all a reflection of the kind of ambivalence that he has towards it. So,
does he have a grasp of what the complexity of the conflict that is really, it needs a serious?
No. As he said once to his advisors, I don't do nuance. But that in some ways is a strength. Bill Clinton had the strength of absorbing all of the details and understanding it and
try to solve everything,
empathizing with both sides and so on. Whereas Bush is much more simple in terms of his approach.
You guys, why don't you just sit
black
down?
Or white,
what's the problem?
Exactly, and maybe that will work better.
Maybe that's about time we'll do this. But
if he actually rolls up his sleeves and gets involved, he's been standoffish.
I'm a little puzzled by this, because after 9/11 and the alienation of a lot of Muslims around the world, and all the polls and all this tells us that most of Muslims, most of the Palestinians, most of the Arabs, most of those people who have a stake in that conflict, they worry about solving the Palestinian problem, and then you have that legacy over there, and it seems to me it's more important than democratization of the Arab world, that he wants to have Wolves of Arabia to go and democratize the Arab world, which it's been going on for 100 years. It's not just something happened in the last few months. But it seems to me it's more imperative to deal with this issue now if you want to deal with the issue of terrorism, the issue of all this.
And if you want to deal with the issue of democracy. Because
Democracy,
if you're going to build democracy, start in Palestine. Because
even before
with the Palestinians, I mean, you've already had a democratic election, but the Palestinians have a robust middle class. They have
educated
a civil society, educated population. They've lived under the occupation of Israeli democracy, and they've learnt from that. They've learnt about the benefits of an independent judiciary because they can appeal to the Israeli Supreme Court to constrain the activities of the Israeli government. They've learnt about the value of a free press. The Israeli free is even a too free press, you know. But they have access to that press. They can influence the debate in Israel through their access to the free press. So they, and I think most important of all, they suffered for the last 6 years under this corrupt, autocratic regime.
Which is a model of most of the Arab regimes, so they don't want to repeat that.
Right, Arafat imposed that kind of regime on them. And the Intifada, I mean, people don't really remember or recognize this, but the Intifada was also a throwing off of Arafat's rule. It was a rejection of his rule. Because they were sick of the way in which this was being done. That's why Hamas, by the way, is winning in the local elections, because they're against that kind of regime. They want transparent government. They want representative institutions. And so if you're going to promote democracy, my argument is start in Palestine. It would have a huge impact.
And people
are
actually, I was Middle East and visiting South, people actually looking at the Palestinian model as a model that can be, emulate in their own prospective countries. So
potentially, I think that's true. But as you said, the Palestinian issue resonates with the people. So if the Palestinians are establishing democratic institutions, it will impact on the Arab world, and it will impact on Israelis too. Because if Israelis see that there are democratic institutions there,
and there is a benefit,
responsibility, responsible government, they will respond to that.
Before we finish, I was just asking you, and I had an Israeli activist, peace activist on the show last week, and I was asking her what would you, she's coming here to talk to the American people, and she said, if one message to the American people, she'd say, do not be blackmailed by the Jewish lobby here, and it's anti-peace and anti-Israelis. What is the role of AIPAC and the Jewish lobby in directing this policy and participating in this conflict?
You know, I think that's kind of simplistic. I mean, AIPAC is focused on building strong relations between the United States and Israel. It's not anti-peace. AIPAC basically will support the line of the government of Israel at the time, whichever it is. If it was Labour Party governments, they would support the Labour Party government and so on. I think it's more accurate to say that there are other leaders of the Jewish community to the right of AIPAC, of the main organizations, that are very anti the peace process because they see it as what they regard as a fraud, as just another way to kill Jews and destroy the state of Israel and so on. And so they're very active and they have a loud voice, but they don't represent the majority of the Jewish community. And I think that the majority of the Jewish community would very much like to see peace, that this is the aspiration to have a normal life in the Jewish state of Israel.
Yeah, look at the last 50 years. I mean, what kind of life did people will go to the army for 4 years? Yeah. But I would like to thank you so much for coming out this time. But before we end that, I would like to have you, I know you've been treated very harshly from our ancestors there thousands of years ago. So I wanna.
It's the season too, you know.
So,
it's
exactly.
Passover now.
So this is thank you for
that's very kind of you.
Thank you so much, and that concludes our show with Ambassador Martin Indyk. Welcome back to BelAhdan. You saw the interview with former Ambassador to Israel, Martin Indyk. And we talked a little bit about the issue of conflict in Palestinian and Israelis. And what is really intriguing about all this, I mean, people talk about Israel and the nature of that conflict as if really nothing is negotiable when it comes to Israel's refusal. And Osama was awesome. I'm going to talk a little bit about the refusal. Osama, you know, I was a little bit puzzled by all this. You know, the University of St. Thomas invited Martin Indyk to talk, and I think under a lot of pressure from the Jewish community to bring somebody to counter view of what Hanan Ashrawi came about a year ago, and I think that they were up to arm to see we need another voice, and I didn't really think that's the role of the university to counter views or whatever, just bring people to talk. I mean, but anyway,
he came and
he talks, and you know, in most part he was reasonable. And